Hey there, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show, a podcast for paradigm changers. Each week I speak with another influential leader who's changing the conversation for their audience, their industry, and this world. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show. This is a podcast for paradigm changers, and we have one in the house today. I am incredibly delighted to introduce you to Banafsheh Akhlaghi. She's a pioneering civil rights and human rights attorney, educator, best-selling author, social entrepreneur. She started a career as a constitutional law professor at John F. Kennedy School of Law. She founded the National Legal Sanctuary for Community Advancement, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring the human rights and dignity of Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian peoples, which has gone on to be quite a necessary and important organization. Akhlaghi has worked as a consultant with the United Nations Development Fund for Women and as a former director of the West Region for Amnesty International. She was named top 100 leading lawyers in California and top 100 most influential lawyers in California by the Daily Journal. She was also nominated by the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award in 2008 and received a certificate of special congressional recognition from the U.S. House of Representatives the same year. She's presented at the congressional information hearings, Amnesty International, ACLU national conferences, lots of educational government institutions, and an ongoing advisor to various news sources, including CNN, NPR, BBC, CBC, the AP, New York Times, Al Jazeera English, to name a few, providing commentary, analysis on human rights and national security matters. Here's what I love about this woman. She loves humans. She loves humans. And I know that you will feel her love in this interview. So Banafsheh, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the generous introduction.
Absolutely. Here's where I want to start. I want to start in a less than obvious place. So I think it was 2015 you wrote your book. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So wrote this book, and I want to start with one of the pieces from the book. There's two pieces in particular I want to read in this conversation. And this one I want to start with. And this book is called Beautiful Reminders. We'll get into how this came about and all that here in just a bit. But I want to start here because as I was preparing for this conversation, this particular passage felt like it had your DNA on it. Like, oh, this is so her. And so I feel like this is for us, certainly, but it's also another introduction to you. So I'm going to read this.
I'm on the edge of my seats. I didn't know you were going to do this. This is so great. I can't wait to hear which is the one that you've selected.
So here it goes. Here we go, dear ones. The day is upon us. Here's to playing intoxicatingly, peacefully productive, tantalizingly memorable time before us. Let's play it all out. You know, all those times, all those items when we say we'll get to someday, maybe, but not right now. Yes, those ones. Yes, those. Whether it's spending time with your loved ones, going to that special place in nature, or checking off another item on your bucket list, let's have a splendidly spectacular time being in our lives. It's all ours after all. Blessings and love to each of you. Here's what fascinates me about you. On one hand, you're this kick-ass attorney, law professor, human rights, campaigner who's done so much for this world and for people and in your life. And you're a deeply spiritual, filled to the brim in your heart woman. and you're visible and out about it. And I don't commonly see that. We have plenty of pictures and examples of go-getters in our world, right? Burning the candle at both ends, making things happen in the world. We have examples certainly of that around human rights and civil rights. And then we have people we consider spiritual, who receive guidance and follow their guidance. And we have people in the world of business, and we'll get there with you in a bit. But I don't often see people integrating them, weaving them together as one whole. And that piece I read from your book has that, let's go get it, right? I'm a yes to life. This is your life after all. Go live it, right? It has that quality. And what I know, and I'll stop talking here in a minute and we'll hear from you. You took a sabbatical and this book came to you. I want to start there, and we'll talk about a lot of other things. Tell me about that. Why did you take the sabbatical? Why was it necessary? And how did this come about? How did this come through you?
So great. So to answer your question, let me step back a little. Prior to publishing the book, which I wasn't going to, because it was so intimately mine.
Yeah.
And it was such an intimate creation from the depths of me, like my essence.
Yeah.
Right. Prior to that, I would, in my life, do my work. And then I would take time and I would go to India and go to Sai Baba's ashram for a week, 2 weeks. I would take, cleanse retreats for myself into the mountains of Canada. I would leave. I wouldn't just stay in the United States. I would literally leave the country so that I could be with myself in my most vulnerable, raw state, so that I could hear myself, so I could reconnect to me. So I'd physically leave, not just my home or my city or my state, but the country. And those who worked with me knew I was doing that.
Yeah.
Those who worked with me knew that this was that time now. This was, that restorative time for me so that I could come back and do my work. And so I had always, in my personal space, had those two woven, as you say. Excuse me. In fact, it was the only way I knew to do my work.
Yeah.
Before we began today, I said, my prayer is always, God, speak through me the words that these people need to hear, whoever those people need to be, or maybe.
Yeah.
That's my prayer when I go to court.
Yes.
That's my prayer before I sit with a client, or used to sit in my past work with a joint terrorism task force agent. Like, it's my prayer when I sit to do my work. But I never would say that out loud. Right? I mean, this can't be any more out loud than I am right now with you, being recorded, and then you're going to disseminate this. This can't get any more out loud that this is the way that I do my work. But it was when I took the sabbatical, so now answering your question, I had to take that sabbatical. And I was going to go for a year. It was going to be a year. It ended up being 9 months. And the exact birthing period, that was just exactly right for me. And this book started coming through me. Prior to that, I was, I went through high school, graduated by 15 and a half. Was in college, spent time at Cambridge on a scholarship in England. Just like mass driven, right? Went to law school, came out of law school ready to teach, and was a professor at 27, teaching the Constitution. 9/11 happened at 3.5, 4 years into my teaching. And then I literally got a phone call, late at night from a former student, and I had to answer that call, not only literally, but figuratively. That took me 10 years. You shared about some of the work that I did during those 10 years. And then I needed a sabbatical.
Yeah.
Like there was a moment where I was so clear. I wasn't just physically exhausted or mentally exhausted. My soul was exhausted. It was so deep inside of me that I knew I needed a timeout.
Yeah.
So I rented a home in the country with a beautiful creek running in the back, in the wine country, and left my house, left my penthouse, left the whole world behind for this period of time. And I would wake up at 3, 4 in the morning. And, at that time, my phone, it was you pulled out the little tray and it had the,
keyboard.
the keyboard on it.
Yeah.
And I would pull out the tray and I would start, I couldn't even see what I was typing. My thumbs would just go. I would close the keyboard and go back to sleep. Wake up now at the whatever time and go back to my phone and read the message. And the message I knew was for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Something beyond me was giving me the messages that I needed. Well, Jeffrey, I started sharing the messages with my friends and with my community. Yeah. And they would say, how did you know that I needed that message today? Huh. And my response would be, well, of course you did, because we're one.
Oh, just hold on for a minute right there. Of course you did, because we're one. But of course. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And for anybody listening, that's like, oh, there's a message I'm here to share. I know so often the voice of doubt can come in. Why am I the one to do this? Does anybody want to hear this? Does anybody need this? I love the introduction of that consciousness. Well, of course they do, because I needed it and we're one. So of course there are other people who need this. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Literally no doubt in my mind. Of course you did, right?
Yeah.
We're one. And so then a few of them said, well, would you start sharing it on Facebook? Would you get it onto social media? Are you on Twitter? Are you on blah, blah, blah? So I just thought, okay, let me just share it and see what happens. And so I love photography. So wherever I am, I'm clipping life in the moment. And I'm one of those types that likes to go back and actually relive those moments. I'll review all the photos often. So I would start to post with that photo that I thought really spoke the moment. And then the responses from the social media reads were just, I'm in tears right now. This is exactly what I needed to hear, or thank you. And slowly, I had to go through my personal setting myself aside to allow for the message to come through. And that message coming through became the book.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
I totally
I wasn't going to publish it. And then for it to become a international bestseller or any of the other accolades was not at all the thought behind it, for sure not the thought behind the books. But to have the words out there and have them to, people still contact me with thank you. I just bought 10 of them and I'm handing them out for Christmas or something.
Let me ask you a few questions about that. So first, I had to set myself aside to let the messages come through. For most of my career, when I'm working with, I get stuff, right? And I remember years ago working with somebody, and it wasn't going anywhere, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I kept seeing this red dress in my mind's eye, right? This red dress, and it wouldn't leave me. And I was like, all right, hey, I keep seeing this red dress. Does this mean anything to you? And I'll never forget this lady going, when I was 11, I had this red dress and everything opened up, right? And that setting yourself aside to let the message come through, to me, that's a practice. Is that your experience?
Yes, it's a tough practice.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes.
easy. I had a listening in the world before this book came out. And the listening was, she's a serious lawyer type that's, that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means. And then to come out and say, I'm also deeply spiritual. And I listen to guidance. Well, that just sounds a little woo-woo and weird. Like, how do you put, I think the fact that I had the accolades already.
Yeah. The
fact that I was taken seriously already allowed me to come forward with the I would say the totality of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the setting myself aside, what I mean by that is setting my ego aside, setting the reputation aside, setting the public imaging and whatever it is we do with ourselves aside, so that I can just hear. So today when I'm representing a client, I will literally say to them, just start speaking. Just start speaking, and I will let you know when to stop. Because what I'm listening for are not just the facts that they're giving me, but I'm listening for what's behind what's not being said.
Yeah.
Right. And the what's not being said is what I'm always listening for. Right. And I got to tell you, Jeffrey, that's what makes me a really great lawyer.
Yep.
Like, not like a, let me just plug myself. I mean, that additional element of me in the space allows for the totality of all that needs to be seen. And then in those moments, I'm looking for common ground.
Yeah.
And then that's how we end up doing well on our cases, because then common ground is what I'm looking for, right? Not win, lose, and you're not going anywhere there, right? Yeah. So setting myself aside. So that practice is ongoing. And listen, there are places where I get hooked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm in reaction rather than in response.
Yeah.
So it's.
Here's what I love about this. I'm like, we're simpatico, right? And it's so fun because I'm like, when I think about my work, like what makes my work, it's, I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm listening to what's behind what they're saying. I'm listening to their personal history, and I'm listening to my guidance commentary on the whole thing while it's happening. Yes. Right. And that's what makes it work. And it's so fun for me, frankly, to hear another person in another field like, oh yeah, I get it. We work in the same way. What was the coming out process like for you around, I mean, you spoke to it a bit of, thankfully I had accolades, I had respect in my field before this, but like, in terms of setting yourself aside, like what concerns did you have to look at or address or set aside in order to go, all right, I'll be the channel. I'll let this come through me. I'll share it in the world publicly, right? Not just my own little messages for me, in the morning while I'm on sabbatical by the creek in the wine country, right?
Yep.
I'm curious about the coming out process because I find that anybody who is here to weave a new story for humanity, however they frame it, they're getting stuff, right? They're getting downloads, they're getting ideas, ahas, inspiration that doesn't come from their mind and might not make sense in the current paradigm of their work in their world. But of course it wouldn't, because we're here to create new paradigms. And like, so as a gay man, one of the things my guidance told me is like, I chose to be a gay man in this lifetime to experience and know the coming out process, because not because I'm primarily here to work with LGBT people, but because I'm here to work with spiritual visionaries who have to come out about what they see and know.
So great.
So I'm curious, like, yeah, what was that like for you?
A lot of turmoil, a lot of turmoil, internal turmoil, a lot of conversations with people that I trust, lots of processing through that. See, right before I went on my sabbatical, I had explored a race for Congress. And not because I wanted to, but because I had been asked to.
Yeah.
And it was only about maybe a 7-week exploration. And I was like, this is not for me. So I stepped out. But I had to take the pause. And I really believe in pause. I really believe in reflection, and quieting it down. It can get so noisy, right? Just quieting it all down. And then I got to a point where there was no choice. Integration, and then having that integration be who I am everywhere that I am, out loud.
Yeah.
There was no choice. I had done a TED Talk that same year that I took my I believe 2011, and that was the first time publicly that I spoke about my personal mission statement, which is the realization of peace in my lifetime. And to talk about the realization of peace in my lifetime in a way that people didn't think they knew. Mm-hmm. They thought realization of peace in my lifetime, when I would say that's my personal mission statement, that's how I wake up in the morning. That's where I check myself when I'm hooked. Wait, am I literally being realization of peace in my lifetime right now? No. All right. Like, get over yourself, Banafsheh, right? And bring that back. That was a big coming out on a TED Talk. Mm-hmm. And then, so this book was just more of that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by my personal mission statement is, I don't mean, like, right now as we're speaking, there is horrors taking place around the world, not just because of the pandemic, but now in Afghanistan and what's happening just in Haiti with the earthquake and the climate change and the fire. There's a lot happening, right? Yeah. So I don't mean realizing peace in those areas, and I mean that.
Yes.
But what I mean is, right now, you and I truly being aware of and realizing that peace is occurring in our lifetime now. Now. Yeah. You and me.
In this moment.
In this very moment. And then realizing the moment that it is peaceful and it is occurring in my lifetime and in your lifetime now.
Yes.
And so then, where does peace exist? Where I sit. right?
Yeah.
It's not even where you sit from my mission statement's vantage point. It's where I sit. So if peace isn't happening over there where you sit, I literally will ask myself, who do I need to be now to produce that result over there? And I will check in with you, right? And if I can't produce that over there, well, then I want to ask even more questions. What's going on for you?
Yeah.
Right. So then I start getting really curious about you because, as you said at the beginning of our time together, I love people.
Yeah.
Like I collect people. You know, it sounds really weird.
I resemble that statement.
People collect stamps or whatever they do.
Yeah.
You know, or there's like all these causes for saving whales and, you know, the environment. And I believe in all of that, but it's about people for me. It's always been about people.
Yeah.
So I get curious about people. So that's what there was, that kind of a process was already in play. And I think the sabbatical helped just really ground it.
Yeah, solidify it, ground it. Yeah. I want to go into a couple other directions. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I wanted to start there, by the way, because most of the people in my world are on some level wrestling with or engaged in, I have a thing I'm here to do, right? And I need to step out into the world and share it and be visible with it. And I'm going to push envelopes. I'm going to push boundaries. I'm going to usher in a new conversation for this with consciousness that isn't common, right? With consciousness that doesn't come from the current status quo, and from consciousness that didn't really come from my own mind. I want to go to a slightly different place, given what you just said around the state of the world right now. And to me, this conversation is about hope and despair. Because I think there's a lot that we can despair about, right? Like in my lifetime, I don't think, I don't have the perspective that the world's ever been like this in my lifetime, right? And on every front, not just the pandemic, not just what's happening in different countries and wars, not just in climate change, everywhere. Polarization politically. In my work with people, I find that transformative change, to use a word I've heard you use, doesn't happen until they're at the end of their rope. Meaning, they've tried all the superficial options for change. And I'm all for, like, if there's an easy fix, take it. Right? That's great. I would, you know. But those long-standing issues in one's life, which stem from oftentimes our childhood wounds and all that good stuff, right? There are those places where, like, oh, wow, I really don't want to have to explore this. But when you get to the end of your rope, you go, the only way forward is through, right? And I love people at the end of the rope because they're willing, right? I love it. They're my favorite people in the whole world. If I look at the macro, not the micro, the collective versus the individual, I can sometimes get hooked by the despair for sure. And then there's this little voice that's like, Jeffrey, we're reaching the end of our rope. I don't think we're there yet, right? But like, ooh, we're closer. And I think it's probably going to be pretty ugly, might be. But there's also this like, oh, but systems change doesn't happen until there's great instability. Like stable systems usually don't change much. So there's a place in me that goes, ooh, right? Like that gets excited by where we're at. I'm wondering, like, with all the work you've done around civil rights and human rights and constitutional law, how do you look at where we're at right now?
You know, you and I both sit in California.
Yeah.
And we are looking at a recall vote for our governor. Something that has only happened 3 times in the entire state's history. Like it's, I'm actually keynoting on the subject later this afternoon at another program. How do I do it? So remember I said the realization of peace in my lifetime is my personal mission statement.
Yeah.
That grew out of a course that I did. So I've been doing these courses since I was 18 years old. And when 9/11 happened, I didn't know who I needed to be to answer that phone call that I told you that I had received.
Yeah.
And I had gone to the FBI interview, which is what that phone call led to. And who I was at the FBI interview was not going to get the results. And here's what I mean by that. So I'm just going to tell on myself here a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who I was at that FBI interview was, sure, you guys sent your kinder, gentler FBI agents, one who's Hispanic and Asian looking, to make it seem like it's we're sympathetic to your cause, and we're one of you guys. We're people of color as well, right? This is right after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in my head. These were my words with my client, and that was my attitude emitting all off of me as we sat in that Starbucks having that FBI interview. That has a whole other backstory to it. And I knew that if I was going to represent this human being and potentially any others, I needed to shift.
Mm-hmm.
I could not bring all that historical baggage into the space.
Yeah.
Regardless of the truth of the matter, how it happens to people, all of that had to leave. And I needed to create as much of a clear space as possible, because the clients that I started to represent and the agencies that were in the room together already were bringing their stuff. They did not need me to bring my stuff.
Yeah.
The only place, that's right. Yeah. So, and then with me bringing my stuff, all I would be doing is just setting, a match to the situation, right? And so I wanted the reverse. The only place I knew to go to work on me as a human being were in these courses that I had started when I was 18 years old. So here I am in that course. It's the first one after 9/11, and we're in the course. And this is going to take a little moment for me to explain. So the instructor's in front of the room, calls one of the students one of the participants up to the front of the room. And Jeffrey, he holds up a pencil. Now I have a pen in my hand, but so he holds up a pencil and he says, "What do you see?" And the participant says, "I see an instrument, a pencil in your hand." Okay, well, why do you see it? Well, because you're holding it and it's in front of me. Okay, why else do you see it? Well, because I know the shape of a pencil and I know that's got an eraser on it, blah, blah, blah. Why else do you see it? This goes on for a while, until the participant says, "I don't know what else to say as to why I can see it." And the instructor says, "Great answer. The reason why you can see this in front of you is because everything else around this is not this."
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why this pin you can see is because everything around it is not pin.
Yep.
So the reason why I can see peace, right? Yeah. The reason why I can see the events in Afghanistan is because everything around Afghanistan is not Afghanistan. So what else is it? So it had me start to really look. And that's why I also had to stop doing my work in the way I was doing it. Mm-hmm. Because everything around, the reason why we could see the fires is because everything around the fires is not fire. So now I start focusing on all the other stuff that it's not. And what is all that other stuff that it's not? Well, it's peace. If it's not fire, then it means it's peaceful.
Yeah.
If it's not Afghanistan, then that means it's peaceful. So my focus, if it's not it's not, every state doesn't have a recall election going on. It's just this state, which is why we could see it. So everything around it is not recall. And sounds crazy, may sound a little odd, a little clunky, but for me, what it means is it gives me a place to stand where I am not in despair.
Yeah.
Because there is more of not that than that on the planet. Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense. And I think it's a very important tool, perspective, practice, because in front of our eyes, most days, there actually is peace.
All day long.
All day long, right?
All day long.
But we open up our news feed and we don't see it almost anywhere, right? My business manager, before I had this conversation with you, goes, she's, why don't I know who this lady is? Why haven't I heard of her before? And I said, because the work she does is often underreported or not reported. We don't hear about that work. And what I'm hearing, and we know this, right? We know that we don't see much good news, but what you're giving us is a practice. Oh, I can see that because everywhere around it is peace. It's not that. And it gives us another place to place our focus.
Absolutely. Now, that doesn't mean we forget about the pin.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean we forget about the fires or we forget about anything else that's happening on the planet. It just means I'm not swept up by it.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not swept up by it, what does that allow for a human being to do? Well, creativity is present. Mm-hmm. Thought and thoughtfulness is present, right? Response is present, not reaction to something, because we need all of that to be able to find the solutions to what is out there.
I love that.
But in this space that we exist, unless truly we are right now in the middle of that fire, and I mean like literally in Tahoe right now, right? Or we're literally in the middle of what's happening in Afghanistan or the earthquake in Haiti or what, physically in the middle of it. That's an entirely different conversation. And even in those conversations, people say they find the beauty, right? People say they can find the peacefulness and the beauty.
Yeah.
So, because human beings are resilient.
Yeah.
I mean, we are amazing that way.
Here's something that I hear you saying, if I put maybe another spin on it. I'm fascinated by this conversation because, like I said, we are simpatico, and the more you talk, the more I'm like, oh, wow, that's a yes. Years ago, I taught a marketing course with my mentor at the time. And in preparation for it, we spent some time asking our guidance, hey, what really is marketing? What would purposeful marketing be, right? And there was this phrase that came out that said, calling from the other side. And the image was this: wherever the people in pain or struggle are, where maybe you've been, which is how you know them and can relate to them, but you've gone on a journey. You've crossed a bridge into, let's call it peace, right? You've crossed a bridge into another consciousness. If you want to serve them, don't walk back across the bridge and go hang out in that consciousness to try to serve them. Stay where you are and, hey, you guys, right? Like, anchor this consciousness and call over to them. Speak to them, in their language about their experience and what's going on. That's the realization. Yes, there is a pencil, right? So don't ignore that. Speak to them in their reality from this frequency, from this consciousness, from this realization of peace. And the only place we really transform, and I, similar to you, when I'm about to go on stage or when I'm writing a marketing piece or doing my prayer, my meditation is as above, so below. May this touch the hearts of the people who are meant to receive this, right? And I will often ask, what is this group like? If it's a keynote that I've given before and I know the content, I will still go, yeah, but what does this audience in particular need to know? Right? What am I meant to touch in this group of people? And it will always be this, almost always something I didn't expect that wasn't in my mind that, like, oh, right. And then they're in my heart.
That's
you
right.
know but what I hear you saying is stand in the frequency of peace while you address what's happening in the world. My mentor always says, you cannot change that which you cannot love. And I know you have great affection and reverence for Gandhi and MLK and great change makers in this world. And I see them as people who stood in peace, serving what was going on.
Yes.
And I love your language and your perspective of how you see and practice that. There's another place I want to go here, which is about your upbringing as preparation and training for your life's work. One of the things my guidance always says is the holy role of the outcast or the outsider is to be the way shower. Right? That we're the ones who've been on the outside. And so we see perspectives and avenues forward that other people maybe don't see the way that we do. Right? That's the, and then there is this psychological journey usually of relating to oneself as the outsider to relating to oneself as the way shower. But your family moved here from Iran when you were 5, yes?
That's right.
And I heard you share a little bit about when, at some point, so this was before the revolution.
Right, in 1974 or 75.
Yeah. Something changed in how your playmates and friends related to you. I wonder if you can talk about that.
Yeah, it was called the hostage crisis in 79. Just the move from Iran to here. I mean, by the age of 5, at this point, child psychologists have told us this, behavioral scientists have told us this, that you're pretty much cooked by that age, right? Like it's, your experiences are going to now shape the rest of your future. Yeah. Right. My experiences until the age of 5 when we left was glorious. I mean, not a care in the world. I was the first grandchild on my mother's side. Persians, Iranians have a way with children that is infectious. We love them. Like, our words of affection sound a little cannibalistic. I mean, we actually say things like, oh my God, you're so cute, I can eat you, right? Yeah, like that means that's how delicious you are. Yeah. We, with our children, we say, let's not even have the bottom of their feet touch the ground because it's beneath them. They're worthy to be held. So you're, go from one arm to another arm to another arm. And it was no different for me. My father had a high post in Iran and part of the Ministry of Finance. So that meant that was a particular level of lifestyle. And then it was time for us to leave because that's what you did at that particular echelon of society. You had your children study abroad. And so at 5, this is what we were going to do with me, is to send me abroad with my mother. And one of the traumas of my life is at the scene at the airport that I think shaped so much of my life. And it's the scene, my grandmother had a big role, my maternal grandmother had a big role in my rearing. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep unless I slept with her. It was that kind of a bond. And I was last in her arms. and she would always braid her hair in these two braids. And all I remember is an arm coming around my stomach and pulling me out of her arms, and my holding on to her braids up into the very, very end, screaming, what did I do wrong that I have to go? These were the words that to me, leaving was a punishment.
Yeah.
And so they came. My younger brother then came, and my father came. I was supposed to be in Europe. We ended up in the United States because my mother had two brothers already here as international students. And the life was normal, but not, obviously, until then we hit 1979 and the hostage crisis. And what we had thought were our friends were now looking at us as the enemy. What we had thought that we had some form of belonging, though we were the darkest people in Orange County, California at the time. Does that make sense? Behind the orange curtain.
Oh yeah.
It was a very white county.
Yeah.
It's still the
Still is.
Republican county in California.
Yeah.
Just for the rest of your listeners to get a sense, that county put Reagan into office.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very conservative Republican white county, and we were not that.
Yeah.
Like we were anything but that, as a family, the foods, the aromas that would come out of our home when my mother would cook smelled nothing like anybody on that street, so I know that episode of the hostage crisis was severe for us and for me. And I used my days mostly protecting my younger brother in school. We were in elementary school and in junior high. This was my age time, is elementary school and junior high. And I should say to you that even elementary school, I skipped several grades. So I was young during this time, and it was very formative.
Yeah.
Where justice became a conscious thought for me. Discrimination was very clear to me, based on your national origin, something that you can't help, or the color of your skin you can't help, or as you've been sharing, your how you've come to the planet. Just forget it, like just period, just how you come to the forget about any other labels, just how you come to the planet. And so that was a turning point.
I heard you share a bit about the taunting and people leaving feces on your front door.
Yeah, it was my bedroom window and the front door of the house were parallel, like they were on the same. And so I would hear my mother early in the morning, and I would peek out my window and see my mother with a hose washing down the human remains that they would leave overnight, because she wanted to make sure that my father didn't see, we weren't harmed, like emotionally by it. Yeah. So she took it herself.
Yeah.
No, it was taunting, beyond taunting. It was threats, life threats.
Here's what, there's a few things you shared. One of the things I see at the foundation of all our wounding is a judgment the psyche makes on oneself, right? Oh, this is happening to me because I'm fill in the blank, right? So starting with leaving grandmother's arms, what did I do? What's wrong with me?
That's right.
And the image of those human remains on the front door, like, you've heard the phrase of somebody being a piece of shit, right? And what a message to have a community send, literally, I'm curious, looking back, the thing that I see a beauty and elegance to our wounding
Mm,
in the way that, gosh, without this, I wouldn't have become this person. Without
absolutely.
this, it wouldn't have sent me on this trajectory to be driven to do this, to learn these things, to become this human, to fulfill my life's mission, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how having the history of the other or the outsider or the rejected has served you and continues to serve you.
So I am in a very unique position, right? I came to the planet as an Iranian, but primarily raised in the United States.
Yeah.
So when I open my mouth, and if you don't see me, you wouldn't know if I was, where am I from, right?
Yeah.
Unless you hear my name, then that starts to open the question, open the door to the next question. Where is that name from? And those of you who are listening to this or watching this have heard this so many times. If you've been raised here, after they hear your name or they see your face, they say, "Wow, your English is so good." Well, of course, I've been here since I was 5. It better be, should be. So I'm in a unique position where I wholly have my Persian heritage. Though I came when I was 5, my Farsi is complete.
Yep.
Because we spoke only Farsi in the home. And I have to tell you, then fast forwarding it to after 9/11 and the number of human beings that I got to serve in my native language made the situation just exponential. So that having that language capability. And so being a woman, and I keep saying that, being a woman is a different way in which we are interacted with in the United States and in the West than if I were a man from Iran. Right? Because, we saw all of those, men from that part of the world, and in particular Iran, are terrorists first, because CNN has told us so.
Yeah.
But a woman from that part of the world, well, they're victims first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We kind of, we have this sense that there isn't strength in them. So we don't need to fear them. So, and I know all that.
Yeah.
I don't agree with any of it, but I know all of that. So I get to use that to my benefit.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they don't see you coming.
No. No, and it's really great.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to overcome any defenses and barriers and any of that kind. We could just meet each other.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I am clear that being a woman from Iran, raised in the United States, those 3 elements alone prepared me for today.
Yeah. And might I add, and you can see if this is accurate, and especially in 79, those years activated your focus on who you want to serve and your work in the world.
That coupled with another event, my father's oldest brother was taken political prisoner in Iran upon a trip back to Iran. And that's what led me to go to law school.
Wow.
I had written in undergraduate school to all the human rights organizations at the time, including Amnesty International, and received a letter back from some of them, saying that because your uncle doesn't have the notoriety and doesn't have a kind of a name in the world, we can't take his case. We take the more public persona so that we could bring,
attention,
eyes to that.
PR.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in my bedroom reading this letter. And I said out loud, well, we know who he is.
Yes.
We know who he is.
Hmm.
And that led me to go to law school because I wanted to literally learn the law so that I could help people like my uncle.
Yeah.
And when I got to law school, nobody was doing that. Everybody was getting ready for, corporate America and I don't know what. And so then I was fortunate to come out and teach. And then I was asked by the dean of the law school, what would you like to teach? And I said the Constitution, because it's the foundation of it all.
Yeah.
And who knew that being in that classroom teaching would then lead me to represent people like my uncle who didn't have a name in the world, over 3,200 of them. That's
amazing. It also, hearing you, we know who he is, we know his name. And, when I look at Black Lives Matter, and one of the sayings or slogans is say their names, say his name, say their names. We know who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So powerful. One other place I want to go, and I know
I got to just say one thing.
Yes, please.
I ended up leading the Western region for one of those organizations later. At a time, which I was only there for a year, a little over a year, but I was there at a time when the Green Movement was happening in Iran, where there was the fraud on the voting and the students and everyone came out. And there was a government backlash, heavy, but thousands were disappeared. But I had that platform to bring the voices of those individuals, and we were able to do some work around that. And I just thought, in that moment when that work was done, I was done in that seat, and I said that this was the only reason why I was in this seat for this period, and it coincided accidentally with the Green Movement.
Yeah. There's one thing I want listeners to get from what you're saying here is I believe there is such tremendous perfection in the shape of our life for what we are called to do.
No
and
doubt.
If we can just trust that it's there, right? Trust, like, it was right. It wasn't, I think there's so often like, oh, it shouldn't have happened to me, or I wish it didn't happen, or I get the pain of trauma. But there's this piece that happens, Brene Brown says, until you own your story owns you.
Yes.
And what I hear in this is such tremendous ownership of like, oh, I see the beauty and perfection of it all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What are you up to today?
So, still busy, still doing a lot of things. But today, where I see my work, I mean, listen, I'm still doing things around the political world and the human rights world. About 10 years ago, I shifted. Instead of being on the front lines of it physically, for example, I'm the chair of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission out of the State Bar of California, and we're responsible for administering about 200 million or so funds to legal service providers up and down the state of California, who those individuals represent are most vulnerable in the state. Homeless, disabled, seniors, like that, veterans. And so I get to now use my experience and the wisdom and sit on boards and help shape how companies are working on ESG issues, environmental social governance issues, on human capital issues, on issues that are of matter to me, and are now finally caught up in our corporate space. So I get to do that, and I love doing that. And then with my clients, I'm in private practice, so I work with startups but they're mission-driven startups. They're the only ones that you could probably, after this discussion, gather that I would, right? Democratizing technology, communication, expanding conversations about social emotional learning in various spaces, autism, and it goes on. So I get to work with these incredible entrepreneurs and visionaries in building out their companies for the long run.
Yeah, beautiful. I asked you this before we went live, and I want to ask you it now. One of the questions I always have, you shared that your personal mission statement, mine, is to activate humanity's news story, and particularly to work with leaders who are activating humanity's news story. So one of the questions I always have is, what area of life or arena, institution, part of society, et cetera, are you going, yeah, there's a new story I'm helping to weave here? And if so, what is it?
It's in business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not in the nonprofit space. It's in the for-profit space.
Yeah.
Listen, we have a lot of work to do there. These non-governmental organizations, these massive countries of their own in terms of their reach and influence and capital, can massively impact in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm focused. I was just selected as 25 women are selected around the world, executives, for 2 cohorts a year out of the University of Santa Clara. It's a Silicon Valley, obviously, institution, to have us become corporate board ready. Because as of January of next year, the state of California must have a number of women board members on their board. The NASDAQ just announced last week that the 2,600 companies there must also have representation, and one from the LGBTQ community. So it's happening in terms of diversifying the conversation in the boardrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And why am I focusing on that? Because that's where the decisions are happening.
Yes.
And I want to be at those tables. It's critical for people like me, and there are many of us,
Yes,
to say, thank you so much for making room. I'm taking my seat, and now it's time for me to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that and I get chills. I'm actually being seriously considered for a bank board seat currently. And so if we could think about the financial institutions, if we could think about health care, if we could think of tech generally, and keep going, these are the spaces that many of us have our experiences. These are the spaces that all of them now need to start allowing us to come in and sit down. And these issues are ripe for discussion. And so given that, that's what makes me excited.
Yeah.
Given that, we can actually now infuse languaging and thoughts and thought leadership that we have been saying for years in our own in our own space.
Yeah.
That is new to them.
Yes.
Old to us, so
Right.
we may think nothing of it, but very new to the conversation in those boardrooms. And so that's what I'm up to. And that's why I work with companies now at General Counsel, so that I can help shape those conversations even further.
What's your vision for business, big business, in society?
Responsible, diverse, progressive, equitable commerce. And that doesn't mean that the CEOs and the founders get any less. It just means there's not so much disparity.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't get this right soon.
Uh-huh.
Very, very soon, this is almost like the Gilded Age, right? Where there were just these barons in society, the Carnegies right? I mean, there were these barons, and we are there in a lot of ways. And so there needs to be a real shift. My husband and I just spent 5 weeks in Portugal.
Beautiful.
And are in love with the country now. I mean, like, just in love with the country. Talk about a place where it's so, it was not like Orange County, where I was the only one that looked the way I did. I looked like everybody else, and everybody else looked like me. It felt like, oh, this could be what Iran would be like. I'm not sure. But so we were there. And listen, Jeffrey, the thing about Europe and this is old Europe, right? I mean, this is like so old Europe, Portugal. The thing about Europe is that there is a sense that we used to have in this country. And it was the sense which still exists today. And that's the sense about the community. That I don't care what you think about the mask or not the mask, but that my wearing the mask isn't about me, but it's about you.
Correct.
So I would observe people, they may have been in the same family, or they were together and they had brought down their masks and they were speaking to each other. And Jeffrey, as soon as an elderly person was about to walk by, they would all bring their masks out, because it was about that human being. Mm-hmm. And so that's missing. That's what we need to infuse in companies and corporate America today. And we have some leaders. The leadership in Twitter, the leadership at LinkedIn, the leadership at Salesforce. There are leaders who are on the cutting edge of what I'm speaking to. And that is what I'm up to.
Beautiful.
That game.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for your time, for your heart, for giving it all. Like, you're just somebody who is showing up and saying, I'm here, I've got this life, let's go. And sometimes, yes, that means a 9-month sabbatical, or it means a 10-day Vipassana retreat, or it means whatever. It's still part of, I'm here, let's go. Thank you for being an example. And for us as humans, for women, for female leaders in this world. Dalai Lama said that Western women will change this world, and you're part of that legacy. So thank you.
It is my pleasure. Honestly, Jeffrey, this was such a delight. Thank you for the time. This is definitely in line with why I'm here. And, you started our talk together with one of my poems.
I'm going to end it with one too. But
okay. Yeah. But I really want you to know, I just want to be all used up before I leave. And I want to just drench out this life and every last bit of it. And so thank you for allowing me to be with you and having this conversation, because it's on the path of what I'm up to. And I get to drench out a little bit more with you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Where can we find more about you or contact you or all that?
Well, if anyone would like to reach out to me, not sure if you have this to pull, but my direct email is B for Banafsheh, and then my last name, Akhlaghi, AKHLAGHI, at akhlaghilaw.com.
Beautiful. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yep. Beautiful. Well, I want to close with another one of these poems that actually I think came right before the other one in the book. But the The first one I want to start with, because it just felt like you, right? That like, go for it, eat life. This one to me represents that personal mission of realizing peace in my lifetime, in my life, in this moment. And so I want to close with this. It's one of those days when it all makes sense. The family and the beloved, the friends and the career, the health and finances, the contribution and spirituality. One of those rare days when all aspects of life have that particular quality of restfulness, the quality that life is going as it should be, and there is order and calm. Not every day or every moment within a day is present with this gift, this knowing, exuding within me. But on this day, I celebrate the peacefulness of life. My loving blessings to each of you, dear ones, on this peaceful path called your life. Banafsheh, thank you. Hey there, thanks so much for listening in. If this conversation was powerful, if it stirred your soul or inspired your journey, then be sure to share it with a friend. Just copy and paste the link wherever you're listening to this podcast and text that link right now to a friend that you think would be inspired by this episode. And if this is your first time here, be sure to click that subscribe button over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and review so I can get to know you and your thoughts better. To learn more about the work I do with emerging and established paradigm changers, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next episode.